I never thought tennis would change my life. To be honest, I wasn't even that interested in the sport. But when my buddy Jake convinced me to come along to a class, I figured it would be a good way to kill some time. At the time, I had a thriving business, my own company, but there was always something missing. Maybe it was the constant pressure, the long hours, or just the lack of excitement. Either way, Jake thought tennis might be a good outlet for me. So, there I was, stepping onto the tennis court, not expecting much. The first thing that caught my eye wasn't the game, but her. Her name was Emily. She was younger than me by at least 5 years, tall, with long, flowing hair and a smile that could light up a room. I noticed her right away as soon as she walked onto the court. She had a natural grace about her, a quiet confidence that was impossible to ignore. She wasn't like the other girls at the gym, and certainly not like the ones I usually encountered in my business world. She was different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but something about her pulled me in. Jake introduced us after the lesson, and I couldn't help but feel an immediate connection. We talked about the usual things, work, life, what brought us to tennis, but there was this unspoken chemistry between us. It was undeniable. I wasn't the kind of guy who believed in love at first sight, but with her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. We exchanged numbers, kept in touch, and the next thing I knew, we were meeting up outside of tennis. Dinner dates turned into weekend getaways, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. It felt like I'd found someone who understood me in ways that no one else did. She moved in with me after just a few months. It was quick, sure, but it felt right. Everything was moving fast, but that was just how it was with Emily. She was always so full of life, and her energy seemed to fill up the spaces in my world that were empty. Around the same time, my business began to take off in ways I hadn't imagined. The company had been successful before, but with Emily in my life, things started to accelerate. She had this way of making things happen, ideas, connections, strategies. All of a sudden, everything just clicked. She had a sharp mind and a natural ability to make people listen. I was impressed by how quickly she adapted, how she pushed me to be better, and how she supported me, even when things got tough. For a while, I thought I had it all. A successful business, a beautiful, supportive girlfriend, and the kind of life most people only dreamed of. But, like with all good things, the cracks started to show after a while. It started small, just little things that didn't sit right with me. At first, it was the late-night phone calls. She'd be talking to someone, laughing, but never telling me who it was. I shrugged it off. She had a busy social life, and I respected that. But then, the tennis lessons started to take on a life of their own. Emily had always been serious about the sport, but I didn't expect her to become this, obsessed. She started spending more and more time at the courts, often with her trainer, Daniel. He was a guy in his mid-30s, athletic, well-built, and way too friendly with her. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about their interactions felt off. They were always too close, too comfortable with each other. He would be giving her advice, touching her arm in that way that seemed just a bit too intimate. At first, I told myself I was just being paranoid. They were just coach and student, after all, right? But the more I saw them together, the more I began to question things. And yet, it wasn't until one fateful evening when everything changed. I was at work late one night, staying in the office to finish up some paperwork, when I got a text from Emily. She'd been at the courts, and I assumed she was just finishing up her session. But when I saw her text, my stomach dropped. "I'm going to grab dinner with Daniel after practice. You okay with that?" I had never thought to question Emily's independence. She was her own person, and I trusted her. But something about that message sent a shiver down my spine. Dinner? With him? They weren't just colleagues anymore, they were crossing a line. It wasn't just about the dinner, though. It was everything, the late nights, the secretive behavior, the way she seemed to pull away from me. I had been so focused on my business, so caught up in the whirlwind of success, that I failed to notice the changes in her. I failed to notice that Emily wasn't the same girl I'd fallen for. I tried to brush it off, but that night, I couldn't. I sat in my office, staring at the phone in my hand, wondering where this was all going. What did I really know about her? And why did I feel like I was losing her? Little did I know, the real test was just beginning. Things started changing so subtly, it almost felt like they happened overnight. One minute, Emily was my everything. She'd moved in with me, and I thought we were building a future together. The next, I felt like I was living in the shadows of her life, while she kept pulling further and further away from me. I had been so focused on my business. We were on the edge of a major breakthrough, and I couldn't afford to slack off. My company was expanding, and I had investors breathing down my neck, pushing me to make bigger moves. So, I dove headfirst into my work, not realizing what was happening in my personal life. Emily. She was always the go-getter. While I spent long hours in the office, she was constantly on the go, too. But instead of focusing on us, she became obsessed with tennis. She kept training with Daniel, pushing herself harder and harder. She would get home late some nights, sweaty and tired, but there was this spark in her eyes. It wasn't the same spark she used to have when she saw me. It was something else, something that made me uneasy. At first, I didn't say anything. I thought it was just a phase, maybe a way for her to relieve stress. But as the days turned into weeks, I noticed something strange. She wasn't coming home until late at night. Sometimes she wouldn't even text me, not until after I'd already fallen asleep. And when I did hear from her, it was always about her training, her practice, or dinner with Daniel. I tried to focus on my work, convincing myself that maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe I was just jealous of how much time she was spending with him. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the long hours at the court. It was the way she started acting around me. Emily became distant, almost like she was hiding something from me. When we did have a conversation, it felt forced. She'd brush off any questions I had about her time with Daniel, always quick to change the subject or leave the room. It didn't take long before I started wondering if I was being played. I decided to do something I should have done from the start. I started paying closer attention. I began looking through the calendar on her phone, noticing the late-night tennis sessions that she didn't tell me about. There was always some excuse, some reason she couldn't make it back home on time. Her calls with Daniel were becoming more frequent, their conversations longer. She'd speak to him in that tone of voice that made my stomach twist, soft, intimate, like they were talking about something private. At first, I tried to justify it. They were just friends, right? Tennis partners. But every time I saw them together, at the courts, at events, I could feel a tension between them. It wasn't just a coach and student relationship anymore. It was something more. Something dangerous. And I had been too blind to see it. The breaking point came one evening when I came home early from work. I wanted to surprise her. I thought we could go out for dinner, catch up on everything. I hadn't seen much of her lately, and I missed the connection we used to have. I walked into our apartment, expecting to find her getting ready, but instead, I found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even hear me come in. "Hey," I said, walking over to her. She didn't look up right away, so I leaned in, trying to get her attention. "Hey," I said again, my voice softer this time. "How was your day?" She barely looked at me. "It was fine," she muttered, continuing to scroll through her messages. Her face was tense, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "I was just texting Daniel." The mention of his name hit me like a punch to the gut. "Oh, you've been texting him a lot lately," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Everything okay?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she just kept scrolling, her fingers tapping the screen with a speed that made my blood boil. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "You're being paranoid," she said, shaking her head. "Daniel and I are just friends. You know that." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something in her eyes, something that didn't sit right. The way she avoided my gaze, how she fidgeted with her phone. It was the same thing I'd been seeing for weeks. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I was just waking up to the reality of what had been happening right under my nose. "I'm not paranoid, Emily," I said, my voice low. "I'm just tired of being lied to." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm talking about the late nights. The secretive calls. The fact that I never know where you are anymore," I said, pacing now. "And I'm talking about Daniel. I know you're not just friends." The tension between us was thick. The air seemed to crackle with something unspoken. She got up from the couch, her face flushed. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "You know how hard I've been working. You're just upset because I'm not at your beck and call anymore." I stopped in my tracks, staring at her. "I never asked you to be at my beck and call. I just want the truth, Emily. I just want to know what's really going on." She took a step back, shaking her head. "You don't trust me," she whispered. "You never did." That was when I knew for sure. It wasn't just about tennis. It wasn't just about the business. It was about her feelings for him. She was lying to me, and I had been too blind to see it. And so began the slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew. The days that followed were a blur, a whirlwind of confusion and rage. I couldn't focus on anything, my business meetings, the calls with investors, the emails piling up in my inbox. It all seemed so insignificant compared to the crushing weight of what I had discovered. Emily, the woman I had opened my life to, was hiding something much darker than I could have ever imagined. The nights became unbearable. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. Her excuses, the little white lies she told me, the secretive glances. But it wasn't just her I was angry at. It was myself, for being so blind, for ignoring the signs, for letting it go on for so long. I kept telling myself that maybe it wasn't too late, that I could salvage whatever was left of us. But deep down, I knew. This was no longer the woman I had fallen for. I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I followed her. It wasn't easy. I hated myself for doing it, but I had to know. I needed the truth. One evening, when she said she was going out to meet the girls for drinks, I decided to follow her. I knew where she was going, she'd mentioned it before, a little cafe downtown. It wasn't far from the tennis club where she spent all those late nights training with Daniel. I parked a few blocks away, heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweaty. I watched as she walked out of the apartment, casually dressed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked carefree, as if nothing was wrong. She didn't look back, didn't seem to notice the growing distance between us as I trailed behind her. She stopped in front of the cafe and, just as I had feared, Daniel was already there, leaning against the door, waiting for her. They shared a quick kiss on the cheek, nothing too intimate, but enough to make my stomach churn. They didn't see me, not at first. I watched them enter the cafe, sitting at a small table in the corner, close enough that their conversation was muffled but not so far away that I couldn't see how comfortable they were with each other. She laughed at something he said, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I felt the familiar sting in my chest, the sharp, bitter feeling of being replaced. But I didn't walk away. I couldn't. I needed more. I had to know everything. So, I waited. Hours passed. I sat outside the cafe, pacing, checking my watch every few minutes. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of what I'd find, scared of what it all meant. Eventually, they came out together. She was laughing, clutching her purse tightly, her arm casually resting on Daniel's. They didn't seem to care who saw them. They didn't even notice me standing there in the shadows, barely able to hold my breath. They walked to Daniel's car. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just watched them drive off into the night, disappearing into the unknown. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely powerless. I stayed in the same spot for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. The pain was unbearable, but there was something more, something I hadn't fully realized until that moment. This wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of everything we'd built together. The life we had, the trust we shared, it was all a lie. And now, I was just a pawn in her game. The next few days passed in a haze. Emily came home late as usual, but this time, things were different. I didn't wait for her to explain herself. I couldn't. I had already seen enough. The tension between us was palpable. Every word she spoke felt like a lie. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every smile, every casual gesture, felt empty. I had seen her true colors, and they weren't the ones I wanted to see. But I couldn't confront her just yet. I had to be sure. I had to understand the full extent of what was going on. So, I did what I should have done months ago. I started digging. I went through her things. Her phone. Her computer. Anything I could get my hands on. That's when I found the messages. The texts between her and Daniel were exactly what I had feared. They weren't just casual conversations. They were something more, something darker. There were late-night exchanges, plans to meet up after training sessions, even a few messages where they talked about the business they were going to create together. I wasn't just losing Emily to Daniel. They were planning something. Something bigger. I couldn't believe it at first. I didn't want to believe it. But there it was, in black and white. They were conspiring to take everything I had built. My company, my life, everything. The betrayal hit harder than anything I could have imagined. I wasn't just the jealous boyfriend. I wasn't just the fool who had trusted her. I was the mark, the target in their game. They weren't just having an affair, they were plotting to steal my business, my empire. I was furious, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't confront her yet. Not like this. I had to be strategic. I had to figure out what to do next. But one thing was clear, Emily wasn't the woman I thought she was. And Daniel? He wasn't just a coach anymore. He was a partner in crime. The days after my discovery felt like a slow burn. I had everything in front of me, the truth, the betrayal, the lies, but I was still trying to wrap my head around what was happening. It wasn't just about Emily anymore, it was about everything I had worked for. The business, the success, the life I had built. I was staring at the possibility of losing it all, and what made it worse was that it wasn't just Emily I had to worry about, it was Daniel, too. Their plan was so well crafted, so hidden behind the lies of late-night gym sessions and training schedules, that I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go. They weren't just having an affair. No, they were plotting. They had set their sights on more than just my relationship with Emily, they were after my entire empire. My business, my investments, my hard-earned money. They had schemed to take it all. And I had been too blind to see it. I couldn't confront Emily right away. I had to know more. I had to find out what they were planning. So I did what I should have done from the beginning, I started watching them. Not just Emily, but Daniel too. Every movement, every word, every exchange. I had to get to the bottom of their conspiracy. It didn't take long to notice the subtle changes in their behavior. They were getting bolder. The texts I had found between them weren't just flirtations or planning a secret rendezvous anymore. No, these messages were about numbers. Financials. And they weren't talking about anything small. They were talking about transferring large sums of money. Investments. Hidden accounts. They had been planning for months, laying the groundwork for a full-on heist. They were targeting my company, the one I had spent years building from scratch, the one I had put everything into. I knew they had a plan to steal my business. But what I didn't realize at first was just how intricate their strategy was. They weren't just going to walk in and take it from me, they were going to trick me, manipulate me, and then steal it when I least expected it. They knew my weaknesses. Emily knew how to get under my skin, how to make me trust her, how to make me feel guilty when I questioned her. Daniel? He was the perfect accomplice. The charming, charismatic, smooth-talking coach who had wormed his way into my life. They had me fooled. But then I realized something. I had made one crucial mistake. I had been too focused on the affair. Too focused on the emotional pain of losing Emily. I hadn't seen their bigger picture. I hadn't realized that Emily's feelings for me weren't the only thing she was manipulating. She was manipulating everything, my finances, my trust, my entire life. And Daniel? He was playing the long game. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was doing it for one reason only, money. I began to see the little details, the subtle things that had been right in front of me all along. Emily's constant pressure to invest in new projects. Her sudden interest in the growth of my business. How she'd talk about selling off shares, expanding too fast, making big moves. But the truth was, she wasn't interested in growth. She wasn't interested in the future of my company. She was interested in draining it. Making it look like a failure so that she and Daniel could swoop in and take what was left. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. They had a plan. A damn good one. And I had been too naive to see it. They weren't just after my heart, they were after everything I had built. Emily had been using her charm to get close to me, to get inside my head. And Daniel? He had been feeding her ideas, teaching her how to take over, how to work the system, how to manipulate the legal and financial aspects of my business. Together, they were a perfect team. I had to act fast. I needed to catch them before they got too far, before they bled my company dry. But I couldn't just confront them. I needed evidence, something concrete that would expose their plot for what it was. I needed a way to stop them without making it obvious that I knew. I started going through my records, financial reports, contracts, emails, anything that might give me a clue about their next move. It was a tedious process, but I was determined. I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let Emily destroy everything I had worked for. And then I found it. A series of transactions, all leading to accounts I didn't recognize. Large sums of money being funneled through shell companies, each one more elaborate than the last. They had been siphoning funds from my business without me even knowing. They had been preparing for this moment for months, if not longer. The cold realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just playing me. They were playing the long game, and they had almost won. I felt a fire burn inside me. I wasn't going to let them take my business. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I had worked too hard, fought too long, and sacrificed too much. I had built this empire with my own two hands, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Emily and Daniel, destroy it. I knew I had to act fast. But I also knew that I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. I had to stay calm. I had to stay strategic. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could, proof of the transactions, the contracts they'd manipulated, the phone records showing their communications. I knew that if I confronted them too soon, they would deny everything. They would turn it around on me. So I bided my time, waiting for the perfect moment to expose them. I couldn't let them get away with this. Not now, not ever. It all came down to one moment. The tension had been building for weeks, the evidence mounting, and finally, I had everything I needed. My patience had paid off. I had caught them red-handed, Emily and Daniel, plotting to take everything from me. The web they had woven, the lies they had told, all of it was about to come crashing down. I had been gathering everything in secret. The incriminating phone calls, the documents, the money trail. It was all there, right in front of me. I had everything I needed to expose them, to tear their world apart. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this. Not this time. But I didn't confront them myself. That wouldn't be enough. I needed to hit them where it would hurt most, where they couldn't talk their way out of it. I hired the best lawyers money could buy. A team of legal sharks, sharp as knives, ready to tear apart their lies and put them where they belonged, behind bars. The day I handed over the evidence to my lawyers felt like a weight lifted off my chest. The power had shifted. I wasn't the one scrambling anymore. I wasn't the one left in the dark, waiting for the next betrayal. Now, I was in control. I remember sitting in that office, my lawyer sitting across from me, smiling like a wolf. "We've got them," he said, his voice calm but full of certainty. "It's only a matter of time before they're arrested. You've built an airtight case." And then it happened. The moment I had been waiting for. The arrest. I watched it all unfold from a distance, the police marching into their lives, taking them away in handcuffs. Emily, once so confident, so powerful, was reduced to nothing more than a woman in handcuffs, her face pale with shock. Daniel, the man who had once been my trusted friend, was taken down in the same way. The smug look on his face as he was dragged away said it all. He thought he'd won. He thought he had outsmarted me. But they hadn't. Not even close. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I watched their fall from grace. They had tried to steal my business, my life, my trust. But in the end, they had nothing. All their plans, all their manipulation, had been for nothing. They were going to pay for everything they had done. As the court proceedings dragged on, I felt a quiet sense of vindication. They tried to twist the story, to make it seem like they were the victims, but the evidence was undeniable. The case was too strong, their lies too obvious. It wasn't long before they were both convicted. Daniel got a lengthy sentence for his role in the embezzlement and conspiracy. Emily, too, faced time for her part in the scheme. The court wasn't lenient. They had tried to destroy me, and now they were paying the price. When the verdict came down, I felt nothing but relief. They had been sentenced to years in prison. And it was all over. My life, my business, my future, they were mine again. I had fought back. I had won. I didn't take pleasure in seeing them locked up. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. I had worked for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not without a fight. As I sat back in my office, looking over the business that had survived the storm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Emily was gone, and so was Daniel. They no longer had any hold on me. I had my life back. I had my peace. But there was one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't the same man I had been. The man who had trusted, the man who had loved blindly. That person was gone. In his place was someone who understood the value of trust, of loyalty, and of knowing when to fight. And as I walked out of the courthouse that day, I knew my life was only beginning. The past was behind me. The future was all that mattered now. I had won.